Growing up, Yoshi's Island was a game that I enjoyed that we didn't own. I loved to play or watch my friend play over at his house. My friend and his brother had funny names for things in the game, like the Goo Goo Gaga Baby Nappers. Playing with him just added even more charm to an already charming game. We usually tried to get perfect scores on all the levels. Not only was it more fun, but getting a perfect score on all the levels in a world would unlock a bonus game and a bonus level. These bonus levels were fun, but they were more difficult for the rest of the levels. The only bonus level I remember beating is Poochie Ain't Stupid, which is one of the hardest Elder Scrolls I remember ever playing. Now when I play Yoshi's Island, it feels wrong if I don't try to collect everything. I'd rather be frustrated at being 5 points off a perfect score than running into a flower room and realizing that was a pointless detour. Yoshis were living peaceful lives in Craft World until Kamek showed up and began turning all of them into yarn. Only 2 Yoshis escaped, one of which was by sheer luck. They sent off after Kamek to unravel the reason why he needed so much yarn. As Yoshis made their way through the 6 worlds, they gathered the 5 skeins of yarn in each level to knit back together a single Yoshi. They collected gems that could be used to activate badges to help them. Certain gems held stamps that could be used in messages to Yoshis in other crafted worlds. They also collected flowers that were needed to reach secret levels. Yoshi's Woolly World is an action platformer that follows in the steps of Yoshi's Island and Yoshi's Story. Craft World, as its name implies, is made of many different materials that are used to make crafts. Most enemies are made of yarn, and Yoshi can unravel them by licking them up. He can then spit them out as a ball or have the ball follow him to throw later. Yarn balls can be used to create platforms, activate secrets, tie up or destroy objects, or knock an enemy back. The goal of each course is to reach the end and pass through the ring or defeat the boss. After completing the course, Yoshi is shown all the items he's collected. Each of the 6 worlds has 8 courses that need to be completed to reach the next world. The goal of the game is to make it to the final castle of the 6th world and defeat the final boss, and get back all the yarn that Kamek stole to restore all of the Yoshis. The expectations that come with the sequel set it up either for success or a disaster. How much of the original game formula the sequel should follow is not so simple. Going from a space opera to an action shooter like Mass Effect to Mass Effect 2 may bring the series more success, but it can disappoint a lot of the original fans. The expectations of the fan base of a game versus those of an individual vary greatly. If the first entry you play is later in the series, your expectations for the series will be different from those that have played since the series started. Expectations will have an even larger variance when there are fewer entries in the series. These expectations aren't just the visuals or gameplay mechanics, but what makes up the essence of the series. I remember discourse when Breath of the Wild came out that it was a good game, but it wasn't a Zelda game. One of the reasons I heard was that it didn't have any Zelda dungeons, and to be a Zelda dungeon, it needed to hold an item that would be used against the boss. But in many of the early Zelda games, the dungeon item didn't work on the bosses. You can't really use a raft to beat up an enemy? I guess you can. I had these same sort of feelings when I played Yoshi's Story. Yoshi's Story just felt so far removed from what I wanted from a sequel to Yoshi's Island. Yoshi's Story kind of had the collectibles that Yoshi's Island had, but it felt like I was just adding points to my high score that showed up after the credits. Progression through the game felt weird. I would beat a single level in a world, then be sent to the next. I was then given another level I could pick from, which was limited by the number of hearts I collected in the previous world. It just felt wrong, which wasn't helped by the Yoshi choir that would sing after each level. So when I saw the previews for Yoshi's Woolly World, I was excited to see a game that felt more in line with what I wanted from a sequel to Yoshi's Island. No more beating a level by eating a certain number of fruits, classic level progression, and familiar collectibles. It seemed like everything I wanted, but with a cute knitted look. When I got Yoshi's Woolly World, I was more excited to get my first amiibo than the game itself. I booted up the game and played through the first 2 levels, and thought it might be more fun to play with my mom. We also played through the first 2 levels and we were both bored, so we stopped. My mom let me know that the Yoshis must be made of cheap yarn if they have all those fuzzy bits. None of the obstacles in the first 2 levels posed any real challenge, and the game felt really slow and long. We spent 20 minutes clearing those boring levels and had little hope for the future levels. I dropped Yoshi's Woolly World because it just felt too easy. One of the main things I enjoy in games is the sense of challenge that is created from the game's difficulty. Difficulty comes from how all the different game's mechanics interact with the player. Because of this, difficulty is quite complex and unique to each player. The difficulty changes over time as the player gets better at the game, and even changes depending on how a player interacts with those mechanics. Not using a mechanic or adding unnecessary steps, be it intentional or not, also changes the difficulty. For another video, I was thinking of games that were too easy, and one that I thought of was Yoshi's Woolly World. To refresh my memory and to analyze the game, I booted up and beat the first 2 levels like I had done previously. They were just as boring as I remembered, and then it occurred to me that surely the later levels must be harder, and there must be more interesting levels. I played through the next 2 levels and had a much better time, so I decided I wanted to give it a second chance. As I was preparing for the second chance, I realized a lot of my original expectation for Yoshi's Woolly World was expecting to be another Yoshi's Island. But there was no way for it to live up to my nostalgia-filled memories of Yoshi's Island. It's really easy to see a recognizable name and associate with past experiences, both good and bad, and expect that same experience again. It's only human to want more of what we've enjoyed. Sequels, remakes, and remasters all seem like easy ways to get a retry and experience we've enjoyed. I love the original, so I'm gonna totally love this one too. Ask anyone who's played games long enough and they can tell you which game burned them in a series that they love. Familiarity with a name is something that companies will pay a lot of money for because they know people will buy things just because of the name. This was the trap that I had fallen into. I saw Yoshi and immediately thought of Yoshi's Island. Yoshi's Woolly World was not developed by the same company as Yoshi's Island. It was not made by the people who made Yoshi's Island. So expecting it to be the same game was foolish. Growing up, Chrono Trigger was always a game that I loved, and it seemed impossible for any game to surpass it. I loved the story, the characters, the music, and the battle mechanics. We would rent it whenever we saw it available, so that kind of made it more special, since we couldn't play it to death like many of our other games. So when I saw my brother had bought the sequel Chrono Cross, I was way too excited to play. Chrono Cross, despite being a sequel, didn't feel like Chrono Trigger to me. There was this annoying girl following me around who wouldn't leave me alone and who kept trying to join my party. At a third of the way through the game, I lost all my party members and spent the next third of the game without them. Despite how large the cast of characters was, I liked only a few of them. There was no time travel mechanic, I could only do duo attacks once per battle, and I never found any of the 2 triple attacks that were in the game. Everything just failed to meet my expectations. But still there was this driving force inside me that pushed me to keep playing the game. I played through New Game Plus several times and saw all the different endings. At some point, I stopped seeing it as Chrono Trigger 2 and began to judge it on its own merits. It may not have been the sequel that I wanted, but that didn't mean it couldn't be a good experience. My own expectations were stopping me from having a good time. There's no one right way to do an opening for a game, but when it's done right, it leaves a lasting impression. Openings should set the tone and expectations for the rest of the game. But they not only need to hook the player, but also inform them on the story and game mechanics through exposition and tutorials. If they aren't done right, players are more likely to bounce off the game. This is why a lot of developers will work on games openings last or go through several iterations throughout the development process. Sitting across the table from a pair of glowing eyes that plays Game Master for my game, taking a railcar deep into a facility I would soon need to escape from, or going from sharing a present with my dad to watching the world falling into chaos around me, all are opening the games that I won't forget. I can't say the same for Yoshi's Woolly World. I remembered how bored I was, but nothing really left impact on me other than how cute it was. What works well for an opening for one game won't necessarily work well for another. Having a more serious or emotional opening wouldn't work too well for the typical light-hearted Mario game. The opening in Persona 5 puts you right into the middle of a heist with the Phantom Thieves. It gives you a real taste of what one of the heists will be like. It teases all the characters by showing their silhouettes and gives a simple, no-risk battle to introduce battle mechanics. With the Royale version, it even shows off a new exploration mechanic and has a new party member join you in a battle. The reason why it works so well is because it's an edited version of one of the heists. But this does work against the game later when you have to redo this section of the heist with all the tutorials and everything. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker's opening kind of misses the mark. Outset Island can drag on if you don't know how to progress the story, the rope section for the spoils bag can be infuriating, and the cell section in the Forsaken Fortress feels bad. The other parts with Ariel, Grandma, and Tetra are all really nice, but the other sections can be such a roadblock to getting to the main part of the game. Despite the opening, Wind Waker is one of my favorite games. This was something that came to mind and sparked me to play more of Woolly World. Yoshi's Island gets more interesting and better later in the game, and surely Woolly World would do the same. I just needed to get there. The beginning of World 1 was exactly as I remembered. It was super cute but kind of boring. Yoshi had his usual moveset, eating things, turning things into eggs, fluttering after a jump to maintain height, ground pound to smash things, and tossing eggs/yarn balls. Yarn balls can be spat out or thrown to take out enemies or obstacles and also create platforms where there were frames. Many of the collectibles were hidden behind fake walls, walls that accordion, and hidden wing clouds. The first 2 courses were just as boring as I remembered, but I pressed on hoping that the courses would get more interesting. 1-3 starts with a Chomp Rock. Chomp Rocks have been a long time frenemy of mine. Pushing them forward and crushing enemies felt good, but trying to maneuver them while riding them felt so dangerous. They also fell on top of me and tried to push me into pits. Keeping with tradition, 1-4 was the first fort level. It was a pretty typical fort level with lava and rotating spikes. The boss at the end was Multi-Mole, who didn't put up much of a fight. After completing the course, I got a message that all the badges were free and decided to try out making all the yarn balls big. Yarn balls can hit up to 3 things and shrink after each hit. You can get them from opening hidden paths or randomly from yarn baskets. 1-5 was full of windmills that needed some yarn. In the first area they had trees with bows on them, so I licked them up, but one of them flew off like a butterfly and landed on a wall. I licked that up and revealed the hidden area. Next was 1-6. It was the first level that I really enjoyed. Its gimmick was logs that could only be destroyed by bombs. I had a few sections where if I wanted to get all the collectibles, I needed to be careful with what I hit with the bombs. Even with a few mistakes by using a few well-placed throws, I was able to get everything. When it was the first castle, it had these cool yarn balls that I had to ride. It also had Bashful Bert as the boss. Just like Yoshi's Island, I had to embarrass the poor guy by pantsing him. With all the flowers from the first 8 courses, the first special course was unlocked. 1S, Hang Tongue, had waves forming temporary platforms. Enemies would drop in on top of the waves or ride in with them. It wasn't the most difficult course, but it was a nice change of pace from the rest of the world. After getting all the gold stars on the courses for World 1, I decided I was going to stop getting all the collectibles. I was only going to get all the skeins of yarn to see all the different Yoshis, and get all the flowers so I could see all the other special courses. I'm so glad that I stopped getting all the collectibles, because getting all the stamps for messages I would never be able to send, and hearts for a gold star would be painful. Some of the special courses were among the best levels in the game, and even some of the better platforming levels I've recently played. In 2-1, fabric formed shifting dunes of sand as it pushed against me, and on those dunes was my least favorite enemy, Tap Tap. They are little spiky boys that are hard to kill. You can knock them over and they will kill each other. The course used waves as a pseudo autoscroller, having me wait in the trough of the wave to pass underneath certain obstacles. 2-2 started with a door that took me to the back side of the course. This new gimmick hinted at what was on the other side and left me wondering how to get there. This is one of the few gimmicks that got reused throughout future courses. 2-3, Walk the Chomp to unwind. A frame chomp followed me around as I collected some yarn balls from a basket. I tossed the ball at the chomp and it turned into a chomp rock. Oh, this is gonna be fun. I went 1 full screen over and there was more blocks that I needed the chomp rock to break. I ran back and began to push the chomp, but realized I couldn't get it over there as is. Then I saw the bow on its forehead, I licked it up and the chomp came back to life. I jumped out of the way and baited it over. With the chomp on the other side, I spat the ball back out and plowed my way forward with the chomp rock. Making my way through the course, making way with the rock and turning it into a chomp when I needed it to go vertical. Escorting the rock through the level was pretty fun, using it to get to out of reach places and destroy the evil Tap Taps. It was a good iteration on the Chomp Stone Zone from Yoshi's Island. It had a really satisfying ending with me getting to cause an avalanche of Chomp Stones to rain down on Tap Taps. 2-4 introduced Woolly Koopa Troopas. Koopa Troopas are one of the most interesting enemies from the Mario series, and that's because they leave behind their shells. Being able to pick them up and use them as weapons can lead to some satisfying experiences. The boss of the fort was not winging the Koopa. With the fort done, I got a badge that would make me immune to fire attacks and lava. Yes, it's just as strong as it sounds. Woolly Poochie made his debut in 2-5, and he did seem less stupid. He did move like in the previous games, trying to run in a straight line to me, and while riding would go in the direction I was facing. But he would jump up to grab items and would carry them in his mouth, so I could just grab them later. 2-6 showed off how the lava came from bolts of fabric at the top of volcanoes. 2-7 was a series of trials using some fire yarn to escape the pyramid's curse. Seeing the name Bunsen the Hot Dog made me want to try out my new fireproof badge. It was just as overpowered as I thought it would be. I could just stand in front of the hot dogs and take no damage from their fireballs. I even got some good height when I bounced off the lava. Despite Chemic's magic, Bunsen had no way of hurting me with the badge equipped. This made me wonder why even have mellow mode when you can do this. 2S, Perils of the Perplexing Pyramid, was all about using enemies to hit a switch. First switch, I need to get a Koopa shell across a spike-filled room and catch it midair and spin it in the right direction. The next enemy was the Tap Tap. First I tried just licking it to get it across, but that got it killed on the second switch. It took a few more tries throwing the balls, but I eventually got it to hit the yellow switch. Next was a Monty-Mole that was really determined to die. Monty-Moles try to run straight at Yoshi and tend to overshoot him if he jumps out of the way. Since they are charging straight at Yoshi, it's really easy to land on them while trying to avoid them. There were a few platforms to sit on to catch my breath as Monty would just run back and forth beneath me, and after I left through the door, Monty decided the spikes were his life now. I did miss the first 2 floors, but had enough of Monty, so I decided to only come back later if I needed to. And I needed to. 3-1 was a cute homage to Yoshi's Cookie with some different cookie platforms. The vanilla and chocolate ones, when hit or landed on, would rotate. And if they were paired up, it didn't matter which side I hit. The chocolate cookies came in different mounts and would fall into the foreground when I got near them, making both an obstacle and a way forward. 3-2 had some rough and tumbles to bounce off of and used mobiles as tilting platforms. 3-3 had some moving scarves that made for some vertical and horizontal scaling. It also had this fly guy that is the real mood. Bubbles showed up for the first time in 3-4. I was unable to pop them on my own and needed the hook guys to pop them. Auntie Mole got his rematch with a helmet and some buddies to help him. With that complete, I got a badge that showed all of the hidden items. I never stopped using it since I was so rich in gems by this point. The woolly variant of the iconic Huffin' Puffin, Fluffin' Puffin, made their only appearance in 3-5. Fluffin' Puffin chicks were the only available ammunition and they had a few special properties. First, there was a nest to instantly get the maximum amount of them. Second, when thrown, they would create a semi-solid platforms up to a certain distance. Lastly, they didn't wrap up enemies like normal yarn balls did. This last bit made the piranha plants troublesome and I needed to use other methods to get past them. Having this weakness for what felt pretty overpowered brought a nice balance and created some interesting challenges throughout the level. 3-7 had some clouds that I could jump through and would sink through if I stood on them for too long. 3-8 had woolet bills that, like the Fluffin' Puffin, created trails that I could walk on. Miss Cluck got enhanced by Kamek and flew around until I removed her trousers. Another boss defeated by pantsing them. 3S Woolet Bill's Last Ride is an autoscroller that is all about keeping Woolet Bill alive. It's quite easy to hit Bill with a ricochet or just accidentally land on while trying to get to the end of the level. This is amplified when trying to collect everything as well. The key to being able to keep up is to ground pound the smoke trail instead of waiting for it to dissipate. The Ukikis make their first appearance in 4-1 as well as spools of yarn. The Ukikis continued their legacy of being a pain. I could climb on dangling yarn, the blue ones stayed stationary and the reds would change in length. Yoshi is so buoyant that he always floated in the water, which made the water level puzzles in 4-4 feel really slow despite their potential to be interesting. 4-5 Sunset at Curtain Falls is a level you would probably think I would hate if you've ever heard me talk about autoscrollers and the derision I direct towards them. 4-5 was what all autoscrollers should aim to be like. It had a pretty basic design, there were curtains that slid down the tracks, and I could ride them. I needed to climb up and down the curtains to get collectibles and avoid obstacles. I could also slide down, knocking any ukikis off that might be hanging on. Sometimes there were additional tracks for collectibles, so I needed to be in the right position on the curtains I was riding to reach the extra tracks. Everything just worked so harmoniously that it was really easy to sight read, so the flow of gameplay was never broken and just made for some really good platforming. 4-6 had a cool gimmick where a curtain moves back and forth in the foreground and only shows silhouettes behind it. What it showed became reality, so platforms revealed behind the curtain became real and disappeared when it moved away. And it revealed the enemy's true nature. Evil Piranha was the hardest boss in the game due to the duration of its attacks and how hard it was to get bombs into its mouth due to the angles it would come at me. 4S was my least favorite course. It had great theming, the idea was cool, but it was super hard to sight read, so it became just trial and error. 4-5 was the Ice World. Ice worlds are generally hated, but I love them in games. The world was full of classic ice mechanics, slippery ice floors that make it hard to stop, ice blocks that needed some fire to melt or something big to smash them, ice enemies that would freeze you, freezing enemies to use as platforms, shifting ice blocks, falling piles of snow, and ski lifts. 5-1 started with making a giant snowball. 5-2 I needed to get frozen while crouching to slide through a path I was too large to normally get through. 5-3 sized up the Ice World theme with magic carpets. Monty Ball got another rematch. 5-6 had shuttle threads, platforms that are like stake platforms, but instead of being one and done, a new one is spawned at certain intervals. You use shuttle threads in a maze with a front and back side to make one of the more intricate courses. The last boss was the I Sniff It. 5S Yoshi's Curtain Call was a harder version of 4-5 and was my favorite course in the whole game and favorite platforming stage from recent memory. The jumps for the collectibles had much tighter timing and there were more diverging pathways. World 6 turned up the difficulty from the rest of the game with longer courses and more enemies. 6-1 was the debut for the smooching spiders. Like the scars from earlier, their webs were climbable and made for some fun platforming. 6-3 had disappearing platforms like the ones from Mega Man but without the whiny sound effect. It also was my first course that I got the prompt about switching to mellow mode. Notwing got his final rematch in 6-4. 6-5 was a proper boo house. It had boo frames that would become balloons I could ride if I hit them with yarn balls when I wasn't looking at them. There were also boo platforms that had similar behavior as boos. They would retract when I looked at them and pop out when I looked away. 6-6 had some creative platforming with sticky conveyor belts. 6-7 Kamek chased me as I got closer to Bowser's castle. In 6-8 I needed to get 4 different colored yarn to create statues to fight baby Bowser. Each color was in a different section of the castle and I needed to bring them back to the main room. White I got from one of the skeleton goonies on the approach to the castle. Red I got from a shy guy in a room full of lava. Green I got from a lone green shy guy on the top of the castle. Blue I got from a room guarded by lunchfish. Once the path was open, I had a quick fight with baby Bowser. He then got powered up by Kamek to be Mega Bowser. Both fights were pretty simple. For the first one, I hit Bowser with a yarn ball, then jumped on him. Next, I need to hit the giant glowing skeins floating near Bowser to power him down. With that, the Yoshis that Kamek stole got knitted back together. Credits may have rolled, but I still had some levels to play. 6S was basically the floor is lava. There weren't many platforms, and when they were, they would all sink into the lava. This was another course that would fall flat if the lava badge was used. Otherwise, it was quite demanding, requiring some good fluttering and accurate ball tosses due to low ammunition. Next up was the boss tent. It had refights with all the bosses of the game. However, the bosses were sped up, but Yoshi wasn't. This made it all just feel very off. Having cleared the boss tent, I expected the last course to open up. Then I realized that the 268 out of 270 flowers wasn't showing me the total flowers in the game, but how many I needed to get to open the last course. I went back to 2S and got my missing flowers. Star S was a cute little send-off to the game that had rehashed versions of courses from each of the worlds. With that, my journey through that woolly world ended. There are a few design decisions that I think are interesting and worth talking about a little bit more in depth. What actually changes in mellow mode? The game is always very vague when it describes it, and when I searched for answers, I couldn't find anything that wasn't just as vague. This is what I found through some testing. You start each course at 20 hearts instead of 10. Checkpoints heal for 20 hearts instead of 5. There are more hearts from winged clouds. You can just hold jump instead of having to time presses to infinite flutter. Aiming is slowed down. Transformation timer goes up to 30 seconds instead of 20. You can skip courses for only 2,000 gems, but you cannot skip the final course. Most of these changes only really lessen the threat of regular enemies and bosses, which still leaves the looming threat of insta-death of spikes, pits, and lava. There is infinite flow with wings, but this only keeps you level, so if there is no platform to land on, it only delays the inevitable. Skipping courses also is kind of weird. Choosing to skip a portion of a game you paid to play is an interesting choice. Badges are a great way to adjust the difficulty of any stage as long as you have the gems to buy them. Only one badge can be active at a time. You can choose to activate at the beginning of the course. You can deactivate a badge during the course. You can pay to activate a different badge in the middle of a course. You can have Poochie show up and help on any level. You can make all the yarn balls turn into big yarn balls. You can make it so you only take half damage. You can grab items with Yoshi's tongue, increase Yoshi's movement speed, have normal fire or ice watermelon spawn, have Yoshi be an item magnet, turn ground pound into an attack that clears the screen, see hidden items, immunity to fire and lava, and bounce out of any pit you fall into. I feel like most of the badges are more helpful than the benefits in mellow mode. Being able to see all the hidden items and fake walls saved me a bunch of time and suffering in my search for all the flowers. In general, I have mixed feelings about the bonuses. Bonuses are just about collecting gems, and you can get them pretty quickly depending on the bonus stage. But after a certain point, I just had so many gems that I just stood there instead of playing them. Woolly World makes a few quality of life changes that I wish its predecessors had. One of which is that you don't have to get all the collectibles in one go. You don't have to get all the stamped gems in one go. So if you get 18 your first time through and the last 2 another pass through, you can still get the gold star. I'm not sure what it is about Woolly World's Flutter, but it seems more easy to pull off cool things with it than it is in Yoshi's Island. I did enjoy my time with Yoshi's Woolly World. It might be because of the contrast with my first time playing it, but I think overall it's a decent game. It doesn't do much out of the ordinary and doesn't have any big surprises. It feels pretty slow, the levels usually feel long, and they aren't interesting enough most of the time to justify having 55 of them. The aesthetic does a lot of the heavy lifting to make the game more enjoyable. The music was pretty hit or miss and felt quite generic most of the time. Even with the few standout levels I highlighted earlier, I can't really recommend anyone invest the time it takes to get to those levels. Yoshi's Woolly World is a decent game, but you might be better off spending your time elsewhere. But if you do invest your time, there are some solid gems waiting for you. Every game deserves a second chance. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out. Yoshi's Woolly World was the kind of experience I was expecting from majority of these second chances. That despite the flaws of the game, there would be some good overall parts that would make the overall experience enjoyable. I wasn't expecting to fall in love with Live Alive, Baba's You, or Octopath Traveler, 3 of my first 4 games. Octopath Traveler is pretty large, but it's still on its way. I hope to be making more videos consistently in the upcoming months, so it should be out soon-ish. If you have your own second chance stories, feel free to share them in the comments below because I would love to read them.